Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'll be weathering the Leichter Armored Car. Winter is coming, and no, not the Game of Thrones kind, so we better get this little guy ready with some proper winter camouflage. Time to slap on the whitewash and make it look like it's been slogging through the Russian front instead of sitting in my hobby room. Before we dive into the winter whitewash, I want to add some heavy chipping. Most of it will end up buried under the whitewash anyway, so why not go big? And of course, I'll be breaking out my trusty leather dye dauber to slap that effect on fast. Who needs fancy tools when you've got a dauber of destiny? Dauber of destiny, it's a good one. Join the revolution. It's a little hard to see on camera, but I'm using a lighter gray to add some 3D effects to the chipping. Why? I have no idea. Most of it, is about to get buried under the whitewash anyway. Maybe a little will peek through, or maybe I just wanted the practice. Either way, this is my first real attempt at a whitewash, so if it goes wrong, we'll just call it experimental weathering. I also plan to cake, yes, it says cake, a fair amount of mud onto this car. I guess that makes sense. Should be fun and a good test run for all my muddy disasters I've got planned for future builds. So stick around, because by the end of this thing might look less like an armored car and more like a rolling dirt clod. It must have meant cloud. Yeah, cloud. But that would apply that it was dry. So I guess it's a clod. We'll go with clod. Sorry. Clod. Yeah, that's just a fancy word for a lump of earth or clay. Okay, now it makes sense. So here I am clodding on some chipping color with a trusty dauber to pull the effect together. And spoiler for later in the video, it actually turns out to be a good idea to go heavy on the edges, because the effect really pops once everything is layered in. And once again, the dauber of destruction strikes. As you can see, it managed to knock off a wheel clean off my model. But hey, when the dauber is hard at work, sometimes sacrifices must be made in the name of weathering. One wheel today, maybe the whole kit tomorrow. I know it's hard to see right now, but once the whitewash goes on later in this video, it'll all come together, I promise. For the hairspray technique, I had two choices, regular hairspray or the fancier ammo products. Now, my hairspray is the mega hold kind, the sort that could keep a glam rock perm standing tall through a hurricane. Tempting, but I decided to skip the Aquanet cosplay and go with the ammo heavy chipping fluid instead. Today it's about mud and paint chips, not runaway hair. You actually get to see me use an airbrush in this video. You can thank the request for longer content for that one. So, while we wait for the great whitewash reveal, let's ramble a bit. And what better topic than airbrushes? Honestly, they're probably one of the trickiest tools in the hobby. Use a cheap one or a rattle can for air and the results aren't great. Splurge on an expensive one with zero experience, and surprise, not so great results either. Basically, it's a tool designed to humble you no matter how much you spend. I still remember my first airbrush. It was an old Aztec testers with about 100 different tips and a rattle can for the air supply. Spoiler alert, not exactly the recipe for smooth results, especially when you mix in zero experience. Years later, I upgraded to a proper Iwata setup. Finally started getting hang of it, and then I took a long break, and now, well, here we are again, basically back at square one, trying to remember which end of the thing the paint comes out of. Oh well, not that bad. Basically, give Picasso some crayons and he'll make a masterpiece. It's the user that really matters. Good or bad, it takes some talent to take control of an airbrush at some point. I picked up my Badger second hand, and at the time it seemed like a solid idea. Lately though, I think the compressor might be acting up, So down the road, I'm planning another upgrade. Airbrushing, the gift that keeps on humbling you. Airbrushing. It's like trying to paint with a miniature flamethrower. One wrong move and suddenly you're in a cloud of paint mist, wondering if you just accidentally redecorated your entire hobby room. The tricky part is the balance. Too much paint and it pools. Too little and you're basically spitting pigment like a scared chameleon. And don't get me started on thinning paints. Too thick and it clogs. Too thin and it's like spraying with water. Then there's the learning curve. Honestly, it feels like you need a PhD in airflow and paint viscosity. Cheap airbrush, you'll be fighting clogs and dribbles for hours. Expensive one, you'll need to learn control, patience, and how not to squeeze mid-stroke. And yes, there's that compressor. One day it's humming perfectly, the next day it sounds like a dying lawnmower. Basically, airbrushing is equal parts science, art, and praying to the hobby gods. Alright, now we're starting to get somewhere with the whitewash. But it shouldn't look too uniform. Think of it like it was slapped on by the crew in the field, not some neat freak hobbyist in a clean room. Of course, there's always the question, is it the airbrush or the user? Probably a little of both. Either way, like I keep saying, practice, practice, practice. One day it'll all magically come together, or at least look like I did it on purpose. Now comes the fun part, removing the whitewash to make it look like this little guy was slogging through Russia in the middle of the winter. And the tools? Nothing fancy, just some water, a few paintbrushes, and a toothpick. That's right, a toothpick. Who knew tiny sticks could be so powerful in the battle against the overly white paint? I'm starting to think I should have gone with the scratches effect instead. Or maybe just waited longer to remove the whitewash. I did follow the instructions on the bottle and waited a full 20 minutes. So probably the latter. Oh well, let's carry on and get this done so we can move on to the really fun part, the mud. Now I'm using the toothpick to add some smaller marks, and it skips across the surface. It's creating these neat little dot effects. Happy accidents at their finest. I'm going back and forth between that and a stiff bristled brush. Maybe a softer brush with the heavy effects would have been a better choice, but honestly, I'm pretty happy with how it's shaping up so far. Sometimes imperfections is the secret ingredient. While you watch me scratch away at the whitewash, let's talk about my tiger build. The figures I want are coming from down under, so that's my best Australian accent, sorry. It'll take about a month to arrive. The plan, I'll start it soon, and once the zombie tank is finished and the Leichter is wrapped up, my September builds will be officially knocked out. And then the first installment of the tiger video, the painting phase, should hit in October. Exciting times ahead. Oh, and I've got a Tamiya Panther A that I want to turn into a conflict tank from that game. Should be easy enough with some spare Warhammer bits, but here's the twist. I also want to make it into some kind of hover tank. How exactly? Well, I haven't figured that out yet, so that project's probably penciled in for November, just in time for the turkey. Gobble, gobble, gobble. Now I'm using a toothpick to detail all the edges, and the chipping work is really starting to show through, creating a surprisingly nice effect. That simple step I did at the beginning, which didn't make much sense at the time, is finally paying off. It's these little details that can really bring a model to life, and a pop too. We spend a fortune on expensive hobby supplies, yet some of the best tools turn out to be toothpicks, makeup sponges, daubers, and cheap paintbrushes from the dollar store. Go figure. Don't get me wrong, the fancy stuff still has its place on the bench, but sometimes it's the humble, overlooked tools that do the real magic. As for the main tools and supplies I use, well, for the weld seams, I've got a Tamiya scriber and a micro chisel set, pretty essential for that technique. I also use silicone clay tools a lot to add seams. Other than that, it's mostly the basics: sanders, glues, a trusty hobby knife, and of course my ever-growing collection of Ammo by MIG products. Basically a mix of precision tools, everyday staples, and a little bit of magical paint sorcery. Looking good so far. Sure, a slightly less uniform or random application of white paint might have been better, but for my first real winter camouflage, I'm pretty pleased with the results. And don't worry, we're not done yet. There's still plenty more of fun to come. Up next, we're applying a washable white paint by, you guessed it, Ammo by MIG. And I accidentally ordered 4 of them. Oh my god, that's like a lifetime supply. And of course, how could we resist? The dauber makes a cameo. Time to slap on that winter coat and see how this little armored car transforms. The idea here is that the whitewash has been worn away by rain and mud, so the crew slapped on another coat out in the field. This paint is washable with water, which makes things fun. I'll admit it, I was a bit lazy and didn't bother with the clear coat between layers, but honestly, it's all fine. In the end, it still comes together and looks great. I'm finding more and more uses for this trusty dauber. Later on, I even use it with just water to help blend, remove, and tie everything together. Have you grabbed your own daubers yet? Watch this video and maybe it will convince you to get one, or 100. And don't worry, I don't make a dime from dauber sales. I'm just here to spread the gospel of this wonderfully chaotic little tool. It's really that good. It's really starting to take shape. Once we add the mud and dry earth, it's going to look absolutely awesome. So stick around, as Arnold says. This time I'm using a softer brush to blend and remove paint where needed, trying to give it a more natural, worn-in look. What do you think so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear from you. Quick tip about brushes. For this kind of work, cheap ones are actually better, especially when adding mud and grime, because let's face it, it'll ruin a nice brush fast. Like I said before, sometimes the cheap stuff is the real hero. I usually grab a wide variety at the dollar store. Oh, and someone at a hobby store pointed out that those little stamp sponges work well for chipping. Looks like my trusty dauber may finally have a challenger. Well, we'll see. We're just about done with the whitewash, and next up, the mud. But before we dive in, I need to give the model a satin clear coat. Yes, I'm not being lazy this time. For a quick brown pin wash. I'll handle that off camera since I've shown that numerous times. Though, so we can jump straight into the fun part, mud time. While we watch the dauber work its magic one last time on this build, spoiler alert, it's probably going to make another cameo with the mud. Now it's time to grab the trusty toothpick, that humble little tool, and give all the edges a final touch. It's looking great so far, and I have to say, this has been a lot of fun, and now, you guessed it, it's finally time for the mud. Alright, one last thing before we dive headfirst into the mud. I had to do a quick pin wash first. I'm using a dark mud oil wash to hit all the recesses and help tie everything together. Think of it as the stitching before the big muddy quilt gets thrown on. Normally this step is done before you start any weathering on a model, but since this is my first attempt at a whitewash, it felt like the right move is to sneak it in after all the white was added. Call it unorthodox, or call it me making it up as I go along. While I had the muddy oil color out, I figured why not try a little pre-mud shading, if that's even a thing. Basically, it's a layer that'll sit under all the mud I'm about to throw on. Think of it as an appetizer before the main muddy course. Alright, we've chipped, we've washed, we've daubed, that's a new one, and we've even risked life and limb with the mighty toothpick. But now it's time for the grand finale, the part that can make or break a build, or at least make it look like it's been through a swamp. Yep, we're finally getting to the mud. I've got a whole arsenal of products ready for this mud job, except the one I thought I had. Heavy Mud by Ammo. I could have sworn I ordered it, but apparently past me decided to save a few, that's the computer, saved a few pennies. The backup plan? Using ammo splashes for the mud application. The only problem, it's a bit on the thin side. So yeah, this could get interesting. So here's the plan, which is already in motion. I'm making my own mud. I am mixing scenic cement with some pigments, which should dry to a nice matte finish. And then later I'll come back and layer on some wet mud using ammo splashes. Will it work? Will it be a disaster? Honestly, I have no idea, but that's half the fun, right? One thing I should have done was leave the wheels off so I could properly apply the mud. Lesson learned. Either that, or I could have unleashed the dauber on them, though, let's be honest, it probably would have just knocked the wheels off anyway. For future projects, I'll definitely keep this in mind to make things a little easier down the road. Another tip, one I didn't follow myself, is to always keep some water on hand. Once this stuff dries, it's tough to remove, so if you mess up, a little water will help fix things. That's actually why I wanted to use Ammo Heavy Mud in the first place. Since it's an enamel, you can just wash it away with some thinner. Much more forgiving than my DIY swamp mix. This is how you learn, by experimenting and finding new ways to do things. The same trick worked out pretty well on my Caro Armato and Panzer IV-F. The difference here is the Leichter is a smaller subject with tighter areas. Not those broad flat surfaces, but so far it's looking pretty good. I feel like I went a little heavy-handed with the whitewash, and now I'm worried I'm making the same mistake with the mud. But hey, that's how we get better, right? You've got to make mistakes to learn, so while you sit back and watch my muddy disaster slowly unfold, let's have ourselves a little ramble. You know, one of the funny things about modeling is how it's like a mix between science and pure chaos. You measure, mix, plan, and then somehow a dauber, a toothpick, or just gravity ruins everything anyway. And yet, that's the charm, right? I got a half dozen kits sitting around, some I've barely touched in years, and every time I pick one up, I tell myself, this time it'll be perfect. And then the glue spills, or the paint splatters, or the dauber stages the coup, and I'm back to learning lessons I swear I learned 10 kits ago. But that's the fun part. Every mistake is basically a free tutorial if you're willing to call it that. Honestly, some days I think my entire hobby is just me proving that patience is overrated, with a little chaos sprinkled on top. Take my airbrushing, for example. I was using my Neo Air setup, which had its limits, but for the most part, it got the job done. Give Picasso some crayons and he'll make a masterpiece. I felt like that. And then I upgraded to a fancier setup, and now I swear my compressor isn't working, but let's be honest, it's not the gear, it's me. I've forgotten how to use a good setup, and this old dog needs to relearn all the tricks from scratch. And I know some of you out there have been using fancy setups for years. Watching my struggles probably makes you grin a little, doesn't it? Don't worry, I'm right there with you in spirit. We're all just learning, relearning, and sometimes completely forgetting what we learned or we thought we knew. So as I fumble with my compressor and my airbrush, think of it as a group lesson. You, me, and every other modeler watching, old dogs and new pups alike, figuring it out together, one messy paint splattered step at a time. The only wet mud product I had on hand was from AK. Stuff usually meant for terrain, but hey, let's see what it can do. Or how Well, this can be a tough one. Spectacular, Harry. Well, you get the picture. It can make a mess of this build. While we wait for the mud chaos to unfold, let's ramble a bit more. Honestly, this channel is becoming exactly what you've been seeing over the last few minutes. Hearing rather, right? Like we've been all sitting around a table chatting about the hobby while you watch me, well, build a model. Like I said before, I'm not here to teach, just to inspire you to try new things or dive into the hobby. And you get to see what works and what definitely doesn't, like this muddy experiment we're doing right now. Since I started modeling, I've always tried to do too much, cutting corners just to finish kits for the channel, and then I moved into 2 kits a month. But honestly, since this channel is more about hobby banter than deadlines, I think 1 kit at a time is plenty. Done right, like remembering to keep the wheels off for a proper mud application, or actually ordering the correct supplies ahead of time. It makes all the difference. Right now, I'm still working 7 days a week while trying to push out a new video every Sunday. It's a tricky balance, but one I'm trying to maintain. Running a channel takes a lot of trial and error before you finally fine-tune it to what you want it to be. And I'm getting there. So far, it's a mix of what I'm actually building and some hobby banter, which from the feedback I've seen, you seem to really enjoy. Ooh, look at that dauber go. Before I dove into all this mud, my plan was just to have mud. Simple, right? But it dried too quickly and didn't give me the wet effect I was aiming for. Would ammo heavy mud have made a difference? Or is it the product? Or the user? Kinda like giving Picasso those crayons, right? You can have all the tools in the world, but it still comes down to skill and maybe a little chaos. But we have to have failures to have success later on. This is Ammo's dry mud splashes. Usually meant to be flicked on with a brush to create realistic mud splashes. I'm using them here to add some dry mud effects. And yes, I've learned the hard way, too much is definitely too much. Less is always better. Honestly, I think that's the only real problem with this build, my tendency to overdo it, something I'm sure many of you can relate to. On the next build, I'm going to force myself to remember less is really more. You know, one of the funny things about modeling is how it's the strange mix of patience, chaos, and creative problem solving. Half the time you're carefully following a plan, and the other half you're improvising because something just went sideways. Maybe a dauber knocked the wheel off, maybe the paint dried too fast, maybe it's just you versus gravity, and honestly, that's part of the fun. Each mistake is a little lesson wrapped in frustration, and every happy accident, as Bob might say, is a secret trick you didn't know you had. Sometimes I think the real hobby isn't building the model, it's learning how to survive the process one paint splatter at a time. And the best part? We get to do it together right here, virtually sitting around a table, swapping stories and laughing at our own chaos. So yes, I had some big ideas for this model, and I watched a bunch of videos, read a few guides, and once I got to that part in my build, let's just say it didn't exactly go according to plan. Don't get me wrong, it still looks good, but it's not exactly what I envisioned. If you know the feeling, you understand. That gap between expectation and reality. It's part of the hobby, and honestly, it keeps things interesting. And I think sometimes people, when this happens, this is where they say, I'm not good. Well, I don't think that's true. You just don't know how to do it yet. And apparently, I don't know how to do a whitewash and mud weathering. But that's okay, because next time, it'll be a little bit better. And yours will be a little bit better. Wow, that was some serious LeVar Burton reading Rainbow pep talk energy right there. Alright, jokes aside, this little Leichter Armored Car is finally looking the way I hoped. Well, not so much. Mud, whitewash, and all. Thanks for sticking around, watching me ramble, experiment, and occasionally make a mess. If you enjoyed this chaos, give it a like, maybe drop a comment about your own muddy disasters, and don't forget to subscribe for more hobby banter and questionable modeling decisions and pops. Until next time, keep building, keep experimenting, and may your daubers never knock off a wheel. Alright, I will see you in the next video.